Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LFC Transfer Room live stream with myself, Dan, Harry, and Brandon. Thank you so much for joining us on this Thursday evening before we get into the weekend's Premier League action, where Liverpool are travelling nowhere, actually. United are travelling to at least a decent-looking stadium rather than their shithole at the weekend to Anfield to play Liverpool, but we won't be getting into that until Saturday with Richie. But tonight we're going to basically have a bit of a talk about the state of the club at the moment and where the blame may find itself to be. Because no matter where you look on Twitter these days, there's always divisive opinions when it comes to Liverpool, be it the opinions on the ownership, the opinions on the tactics, on the manager, how injuries are being managed, how stuff has happened in the past. A lot of signings. Darwin Nunez is one of those, and we'll touch on him later on in this stream. But realistically, it's one of the most divisive topics when it comes to Liverpool fans, and you usually either find yourself on one side of the aisle or the other. You're either FSG in or you're FSG out, and there's very rarely you'll find somebody that's just directly down the middle, and that's unfortunate because we're quite an emotional fan base. So it's one of those that we need to see, and I just see a lot of comments coming in straight away. Yes, Stig, it's the blame game tonight. We're going to see who is where whose door the blame needs to rest at the most. We've obviously here with Robbie mentioning FSG out, players agreed 100% is John's opinion on it. We then have we'll get to the Darwin Nunez stuff later on. We've Grant mentioned state of the club, let it play out, and you'll know exactly what each player wanted. Yeah, that's no problem. And then you have Jay Muse mentioning as well the Red Sox model. It's complete. There's a lot of stuff that's in here, and we'll get to everybody's comments as well. But before we do so, and we jump into everything, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Make sure you have your notifications on for all future streams and videos so that you never miss out. If you're currently watching on X or Twitter at the moment, make sure to jump over to our YouTube page and subscribe there as well. We have a lot of content there for you guys to watch and enjoy, so make sure that you get that done. But we are very good, Ernest Lots Army. We're absolutely fantastic. We're top of the league. We're top of the Champions League. We're in the semi-finals of the EFL Cup, and we're relatively healthy in the squad as well, barring obviously Ibrahima Konate and Connor Bradley. Craig mentioned in here that FSG out always just one or two short every season. We'll touch on that, and we'll touch on how their transfer model works, because I don't know, I feel a lot of people don't really understand the Moneyball version of how things work. But it's the reason I say that. We'll touch on that in a little bit, but I digress because I've talked enough at this stage now. So what I said to the lads is what I'm going to do, and what I'm going to do for you guys as well is, first of all, what I'm going to do is just going to post a little comment here to say who is at fault for the contract situation. So forgive the spelling because I wrote it kind of quickly. But if everybody could throw into the comments who they feel is at fault for the contract situation, and we'll take a pinch of a couple of them from as many sides of the aisle as we possibly can. So we've Stephen here mentioning, obviously, that FSG is the primary culprit. Their model is now outdated, and other clubs are spending more too. Are they? We'll touch on that in a moment. If anybody else has any other thoughts on it, throw them in. And what we'll do, Curtis here mentioning that he thinks Klopp is at fault. The club, FSG here from Vernon. As I said, you're never going to find one constitute answer between everybody. And then we have Ernest Lots Army with FSG for sure. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the panel who they think is at fault and why they think they're at fault. If it's multiple people, it's multiple people. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out the exact scenarios that have happened since 2021 when Trent last signed his deal. And then we're going to ask the question again. So what I'll do now is, Harry, I'll throw it over to yourself first, and I'll work my way around the panel to Brandon and then Dan. Who would you rest the blame at? Whose door are you parking most of the blame at when it comes to this? Is it the club as a whole? Is it FSG possibly not spending and wanting to look too much into it? Is it Richard Hughes? Is it Michael Edwards? Is it Klopp for how things were handled previous to this season? Or is it a multifaceted blame that goes at multiple people's feet?
As someone that's not overly clued up on everything, I'd say there's so many different ways of looking at it, and you could place a bit of blame on everybody. I think Klopp leaving when he did, when they were down to those how far they were in their contracts, it created a lot of uncertainty for those three players. They didn't know what would happen when a new manager came in. Would it be successful? Would it be rubbish? So they were sort of less inclined to go and sign a contract without thinking about it as much. I think there must always be some sort of a spotlight on the whoever's responsible for the contracts and, handling the negotiations. So I would think the sporting director, but as I say, I don't know as much as others. And I think the club as a whole, I think the owners don't like giving out the big contracts to the older players, as long as they might want. But as I say, apparently Salah's asking for 2 years. Van Dijk's happy with 2 or 3, and they aren't overly long contracts, so I don't see why it'd be a problem there. But that's my outlook as someone that's not overly clued up on it. That's how I see it.
No, that's fair enough. Just a couple of comments that have come in here. Look, if you're not clued up on it, you're not clued up on it. That's fine. I'm massively detailed oriented, as one thing. And you might it's not. I'm convinced it's not Edwards doing, and I'll explain why in a moment, Stephen. And I think you might see the clarity on this once we get through explaining it. Craig mentioned in here, why couldn't they extend the contracts before Klopp announced he was leaving? First of all, that's operating in massively bad faith, and they definitely feel like they were betrayed if you did that. That's it. It is that, but and that's it's one of the, and just going to back up. Look at say FSG, but not for the model. The lack of organizational nous when Ward left as sporting director, then Schmackta, Gordon, and so on. Yes, you could argue that as well, but then there's nuances to that too with regards to offering Klopp more power when it comes to that. And then Craig mentioned, and 100%, it's their fault when they can offer new contracts at any time, but haven't. If it was that simple, they would have offered contracts a long time ago, unfortunately, Craig. But we'll get into all of that now. So we'll get through to Brandon and we'll get through to Dan, and then I'm going to give everybody a rundown of exactly what happened. So Brandon, is there any one specific person that the blame falls at here, or is it very much similar to what Harry mentioned, that it's a multifaceted thing? Or do you think there's any one specific or multiple people to blame?
No, I'm definitely with Harry's thinking. It seems like the blame can kind of equally go. Nothing in life is that simple as one person has made this mistake. With the timing of everything, Klopp, I think, was November. He kind of found out he was going to be leaving. Then we find out in February. I mean, year and a half left on the deals. They got to know who's coming in. Slot could have came in and just been completely out of his depth, and we were in a horrible situation. Why would they want to stick around for that? So, I mean, luckily that's not been the case. I am of the mind, though, that with FSG, I'm not one of those gives Salah what he wants, but at the same time, I think it's a win-win to give him a contract or for Van Dijk, because if they continue to play like they do, we've signed 2 of the best players in the world at their positions for 2-3 more seasons. And if they do not perform or they fall off a cliff, we have ammo whenever, players at this age hit that contract spot and say, this is why we don't give out these long contracts. Do you think you were better than Van Dijk was or Salah was? Like, if they're not performing, this is why we don't give out 3-year contracts to people at 32, 33 years of age. Klopp, I mean, outside of just being burnout, I guess that's where the blame would lie for him, is just, when you get burnout, you get burnout. I've been burnout plenty of times in life and not done my best. I definitely haven't had a job as stressful as Liverpool football manager and the fans that we do have, which best fans in the world, but we are a passionate bunch. But yeah, I think the blame just kind of goes all around.
Yeah, I think we might all end up on the same sort of wavelength here. And then obviously Jamie was mentioned here, why can't Trent just man out and come out and say reports are BS, or yes, I would like to leave, more respect if he leaves. 100%. And I think a lot of people are in the same boat in relation to that, and I don't think he particularly cares at this moment. I think he's damned if he does and damned if he does. Damned if he does and damned if he doesn't, unfortunately, because if he comes out and says I'm leaving, well then now that throws the rest of the season up in the air. I don't think Real Madrid are going to get him. And the reason I say that is because of how loud Real Madrid are currently shouting from their Relevo reporters, their Marca reporters, and so on and so forth. you don't scream that loud that you're confident if you're actually that confident in the player coming. You also don't try and bid twice in January for the player when you know you're getting them in 6 months for free. I say free. You know you can get him without a transfer fee in 6 months. They bid 120 million euro for Kylian Mbappe before he just went and signed a new deal with PSG. And then 2 years later, in the full 12 months before Mbappe joined Real Madrid, there was zero bid. There was zero news about it. And Fabrizio Romano was pumping it out that he's going to Madrid, he's going to Madrid, he's going to Madrid. And then obviously he ended up at Madrid, and the rest is history. Real Madrid didn't feel the need to pump as much PR out for that, but they really feel the need to pump it out now. And that gives me, call it delusion, but that gives me an awful lot of confidence in relation to how so how do you mean Joyce's Edwards comments? What do you mean by that, Jimmy? Let me know in a different comment what you mean by that. I'm not sure if I'm catching your drift on that. But in the meantime, Dan, is there any singular person that the blame lays at, or do you feel it's a conjoined effort between everybody that the blame needs to sort of be spread across the entire organization as a whole, or is this just a situation of shit circumstance?
As with all complex questions, you normally have a complex answer, so I'll try and leverage it. What is the one thing that everyone lauds about Liverpool that we put over every other club? We don't go around wasting our money buying players that aren't very good. We don't go out and spend £100 million on or £89 million on Paul Pogba or so on and so forth, and these players don't work out. We try and be the most clever people in the room, and that's why we had Michael Edwards and we all lauded him and we thought he was brilliant. But what comes with him, unfortunately, he's somebody who is also incredibly ruthless. He's somebody who will look at it and say, this is what we see you as now, but we're going to give you a contract, or we're going to renew you in the future based on what you're going to go and do. And I think what we're looking at now is a 6-year deal was put in place for Alisson. Fantastic. That came in there. The biggest concern was Trent Alexander-Arnold's engineered situation to put himself in this position of 4-year deal, which was very unusual. We don't normally do something like that, especially for a player. And I don't believe that was what they really wanted at the time. I think that it was right that the club didn't go forward to try and renew contracts under a false pretense of Jurgen Klopp still being within the team. If he communicated back in November, which is when he said he'd made his mind up that he was going to leave the club, and was then to say, well, this is our plans, this is what's going to happen, this is what we're going to do, you can back that I'm going to be here till X, Y, and Z as part of your contract, and then we did sign him at that point, then that would be a bit unfortunate and put us in a position where those guys are going to say, well, like Brandon said, we've got the wrong person, slots say didn't work out, we're now mid-table, we need a rebuild, we're now going to spend the next 2-3 years sort of in limbo land, and these lads have basically said, this is the best I'm ever going to be, I'm only going to get worse, I need to win something. So right now, I don't individually blame any particular person, and I can't put too much on Richard Hughes and Michael Edwards right now, as there has been around about a 2.5-year amount of work that hasn't really been dealt with. We've sort of just coasted along as when Jurgen Klopp took over. Practically, the day that Michael Edwards left, Julian Ward did come in as the sporting director, but I've just been looking here and reading of what he did. Julian Ward's appointment, July 2022. What did he do while he was here? He signed Darwin Nunez for a record fee. Not exactly the greatest piece of business, not on Darwin Nunez, but it just wasn't a very Liverpool way of doing business. I think you would all agree that we just go out and break a club record for a player. It didn't seem quite right. And then the reports have come out that purchase was Jurgen Klopp led, that he was the person who made his mind up, that he was the person that he wanted to bring into the club and he was going to be the future of our attack. Then what happened? Julian Ward left, and his words were he wanted a break from football. I mean, is anyone going to buy that? He's only just took over from the job from the man he'd been learning from as his assistant, and then quits within 1 year. I think the proof was in the pudding when he came back as soon as you got left. There was a lot of blame that I think needs to be put in this situation right now as an off the field, probably as to where Jurgen Klopp had left us, because we'd lost the people in the back room. And what we've now gained is a head coach in Arne Slot, who, when you ask him a question about what's happening off the pitch, it's not his problem. That's Richard Hughes' problem. My problem is the players on the pitch. As long as they perform, as long as they play well, and as long as the results keep going the way we want, I'm happy. So for me right now, it's a situation that unfortunately you can't just hand 31, 32, 33-year-old players massive contracts and then think, well, there's no risk involved with that, because there is. Because absolutely anything can happen to players who are getting into the mid-30s. So we want Salah to sign, but if we all roll the clock back 6 months, 7 months, a lot of people were saying send him off to Saudi.
Yeah, like it was big Liverpool accounts all over X and Twitter and Instagram saying that please Saudi come take him off our hands. We won't name names, LFC Laurie, and watch LFC because he touches kids. But anyways, hey, look, that's the name of the video he shared. It's not me. So what I'm going to do now for everybody, if you bear with me just a couple of seconds, I have a load of comments saved, and we'll get to them very much in a moment. But before we do, and before I move on to read out the timeline of events from since Trent last signed his deal, I just want to ask everybody to make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't done so. Make sure you have your notifications on for all future streams and videos, and so that you never miss out as well. So, Harry, this will probably clue you in a little bit more. So this is a breakdown of everything that happened within the club based around these three players since Trent signed his deal the last time. So Trent signed his deal in 2021. We wanted to give him a 6-year deal. He settled on 4. We should have gone for 6. Is what it is. Virgil van Dijk signed his extension in the same year. So that was also a 4-year deal in 2021, right? In 2022, neither of them guys are going to get a brand new deal because they've just signed it 12 months ago. Salah gets his extension in that year. Michael Edwards now leaves the club. This was following the big bust up over Jordan Henderson and his deal extension. Klopp gets an extension signs an extension until 2026 in that year as well, and gets more power added to his transfer business. Ward then takes over from there. So that's where. So what happens then is in 2023, the first half of 2023, which is the calendar year, not the season itself. So in the first half of 2023, it's a bad season. No director of football. Owners were thinking of selling. There's zero certainty. Salah's just renewed his deal 12 months ago. Trent and Verge are on the second year of their 4-year deals. They're not going to renew with all of this uncertainty in the club. So they're 24 months out at this point. Julian Ward then leaves the club at the end of the year, and Klopp gains even more power. So then in the second half then of 2023, Klopp announces he's leaving in November. He tells the club in November. Now, I'm pretty sure everybody here knows Klopp about as much as everybody else does. He doesn't really seem like the kind of man that's going to make that decision on a whim overnight. That decision was rattling around his brain for months. And during the summer, that was the summer we got Ryan Gravenberch, Alexi McAllister, Dominic Szoboszlai, and Wataru Endo. Probably one of our best summers in quite a long time, even though we didn't go and spend silly money. We only spent the guts of £150 million. Chelsea paid more than that for Caicedo and Lavia combined, just to point out that. And we've gotten 3 better players that will cement our midfield for the next 5 years. So with Klopp announcing that he's left, right, all of a sudden now the club have the opportunity. And one of the comments here was asking about that. And I want to go back up to it. Where is it? Let me have a look. So why could they not extend the contracts before Klopp announced he was leaving? Because Klopp would have had to have sat in front of those players and lied to them. Because his contract was up in 2026. They would have been extending beyond that. He would have to have assured them that he was probably going to extend beyond that as well. He doesn't seem like the type of person that would sit in front of the players that he brought up through the club and lie to them, especially Trent. I don't think he does that personally, me. But that's just to continue going there. As Jamie has mentioned, ethics. And it's more so competing with a team that is cheating year in and year out, JMUs, that no matter what you do, you're fighting with one arm behind your back, I feel. That takes a toll on any manager. When you're abiding by the rules and the rich kid down the road is just getting everything handed to him, it takes a toll when you're busting your balls every week, day in and day out, to try and get the same result with less. And it's not less because the club didn't give them less, it's less because they were cheating the rules. Anyways, we now move into the first half of 2024, which was this time last year. Klopp tells the club he's leaving, and he tells the players he's leaving. So now the likes of Van Dijk, Salah, and Trent are like, I don't want to be part of a fucking rebuild. Why would I be part of a rebuild? So they need to, no matter what words are told to them, they need to see stability in the club that they haven't seen stability in the back office in a number of years. So Michael Edwards gets signed. Richard Hughes gets signed. Julian Ward comes back. They get the youth guy from Benfica. There's 4 huge appointments by the club straight away to stabilize the front office and bring Everton forward. Now they need to go through the summer, and they have a European competition on during the summer as well. Salah gets to stay behind because he's not with, I don't think he was with Egypt during the summer either. So it's one of them that it can't really be, because I'll give you this analogy, because Craig, and I want you to answer this honestly. When Michael Edwards left, it was because of the Jordan Henderson thing, and he was getting overruled in transfers, and he was basically getting pushed out of his own job. So I'll ask you this. At the time, would you have rathered Edwards or Klopp? And that was essentially the choice, because one of them was going. It was one of the two, and one of them would have walked one way or the other because of the clash of it. So that's the main point. So out of the two of them, who would you have taken? Because I can guarantee you, if the owners had let Klopp go, I can guarantee you they will be hung. There's not even a question in my mind about that. If they picked Edwards' side, they would have been hung. But you can't. I'm not blaming Edwards for leaving. I'm saying that's what happened. I'm just giving you the analogy of what happened. Edwards left because of the clashes with Klopp. And Maddie here mentioned, you're missing the point. It should have started when Jurgen was honest about leaving. They should have been sold if they were being reluctant. That's what you have to. That's not what you have to. That's not how Liverpool operate. I'm really sorry, Maddie. That's the worst way I've ever seen Liverpool operate in my life. That's definitely not it. But it's
sorry. Was he suggesting that they weren't immediately willing to sign a new deal? We should have sold them.
Yes, that's essentially what Maddie is saying there, and I don't believe that would have been the case of how. Like, if the club did that, you'd lynch them as well. The club is FSG in this moment were damned if they did and damned if they didn't. And let's get it straight. Liverpool, even in recent history, have not got the greatest sort of record when it comes to bringing managers in. I mean, that's just the truth of it. Brendan Rodgers, was he a success? No. Was Kenny Dalglish a success when he came in for the second time? Obviously not, but that was more to steady the ship. But you can't just say to professional footballers who've got either the very best years of their time in front of them, or the last years of their time in front of them, and say, just trust us, lads, we know what we're doing. It's too much of a risk, and who knows, Arne Slot was pretty untested up to a point. Of course, he'd won the Eredivisie and he'd won the cup in Holland, but there's a big old step up, and he hasn't half made the step up, and it goes a long way to show the trust that the people upstairs know what they're doing to the players now. Yeah. But you can't just say, "Oh, well, trust us. If you don't like it, there's the door." I don't think that helps anyone. It doesn't really. So we're on now to this current season. So the lads have played a little bit, and they're like, it's Salah's last deal. It's Van Dijk's last deal. Trent is now in his physical prime. Neither of them three want to be part of a rebuild. And you can completely understand that from a competitive point of view. Salah and Van Dijk are in their last deal. They want to win trophies. That's completely fine. Trent is going into his prime. He doesn't want to be part of a rebuild. That's completely fine. People are looking at this from a point of view of, we're winning. We're one of the best teams in the world. If we had gone to absolute shit, nobody would worry about them. Not worry about them leaving, but nobody would hold the same anger at Trent for not being as vocal about wanting to stay. Because you could be like, okay, look, we're a bit shit. We're in like 8th or 9th. We're not really competing. Let's blow it all up and try and rebuild it because we have Edwards and Everton. We've done it once, we can do it again, kind of a thing. You'd understand that. But we're on for a quadruple. That's the way. That's the problem with it. So now that we're actually really, really doing well, and they can see that there is the opportunity to win a lot of trophies here in their twilight years, that's why Van Dijk and Salah are like, look, we want to stay. We want to be part of this project. And then obviously Trent is like, I want to be respectful towards the club. And look, we'll get on to him in a moment, but that's essentially what he is, and he wants to do it behind closed doors. Stevie mentioned in here, the problem at the moment is because nothing is happening. The silence means that the media and Joe Blogs just make up their own stories, make up their own noise. Absolutely. 100% agree on that. One way or another, we will get to an outcome. We just have to trust the process and hope that the common sense will prevail. 2 out of the 3 will be successful. It hurts, but I can accept Trent going. You're not the only one on that, and I think a lot of people are also sat on that train as well. So now that I've explained everything that's gone down through it, is there anybody that would change their opinion away from FSG? Now, this is in the comments themselves. Is there anybody that would change their opinions away from FSG? Now, we've Zia here mentioning FSG, if you think about it, have been good owners. They're not completely innocent, but no owner is. Klopp never sold players like Hendo, etc. when Edwards did. See, that's another key point. There was such clashes of everything. Just going back up through a couple of the comments, and Schmachta wasn't in charge of contracts. It was left to Gordon and soon left to handle the possible part of the sale of the club. This is the time the contracts should have been sorted, in my opinion. True, but again, you'd have to have Klopp, who, rumor has it, and obviously unsubstantiated rumors, it might have been health reasons that he wanted to leave, that it was just pure burnout. But then even if Gordon was there looking after it, Klopp would still have to give assurances, and I don't think he was able to do that. Just going up here and looking at the rest of them, I seen one as well. Where is it? Somebody said it's the lack of stability. So yeah, Klopp wore himself out with the club and FSG, not FSG, but with City, should I say? There's so many mixed opinions on it. Like FSG with a little bit more spending could have been beloved by the all. But Stephen, would it shock you to know that FSG actually spend right at the limit of what they're allowed to? Would it really shock you if I told you that? Because that's exactly what's happening. I've seen people on Twitter say, "Oh, I'd love us to get Saudi ownership." They'd still only be able to spend the same amount of money, you silly pricks. So it'll be Saudi ownership just with the same amount of money being able to be spent. UEFA have brought down, it was 2 years ago, it was 90%. Last year, it was 80%. And by the end of this year, it would be 70%. You can only spend 70% of your overall turnover, which last year that it was reported in June 2024 was £597 million. We can only spend 70% of that on player fees, amortization, agent fees, salaries, bonuses, manager salaries, manager bonuses, etc. At the moment, Mo Salah earns £52 million a year after bonuses. That's nearly 10% of our entire wage budget is going on him. Now, he provides a serious amount of goals and assists and output. I'm not going to deny that. But when you look at the bare numbers of it, that's why this stuff is so fine that the club basically have to kind of really tread a fine needle here. It's the spending propaganda. Some people turn around and say, bring us Isak. Isak's quoted at £150 million. Well, that's not a chance.
I mean, just in response to when we were talking about I'll take their word for that. Mike Gordon took over from contracts and George Schmachta, whose job it would have been actually to deal with them. For anyone who doesn't know, Mike Gordon, president and one of the co-founders of Fenway Sports Group, his background is investment banking. He has absolutely no clue when it comes to dealing with that side of it. That shows that what happened was not in the plan. It wasn't in the game plan for Julian Ward to walk away for personal reasons. I don't buy that. I don't believe that in the slightest. This was a bit of a bombshell, that something that maybe comes out in a book in 20 years' time, where there was a little bit of a rift that had gone on, and we ended up in this situation not through anyone, malignantly trying to cause this problem, but it happened. I think there was this overall realization that sort of football clubs can't run with managers anymore. I think there's too much going on in a football club now for your Alex Fergusons or your Arsene Wengers who can kind of do it all. They can find the players, coach the players, manage the team, manage the egos, deal with the contracts, and do all that stuff. I think there's a realization now that footballers have become so much more complex than just how much do you want a week and how much of a bonus do you want for scoring goals. There's so much more that goes into it, and why these contracts are also so much more difficult. Just listening to it, which is just as an example on a much smaller scale. If anyone's ever watched the Under the Cosh podcast that interviews footballers, there's one that I kind of saw as a TikTok, and it was Troy Deeney discussing his contract negotiation with Watford, and it just explained all of the very odd things that go into contracts when it comes to them, like you being offered a box and having this and just all these other smaller bits and pieces that go into it, that it isn't just a case of giving what he wants. Because I honestly don't think it's just down to an amount of money per week. I think it's more of a difficulty of saying, we'll give you the money, but for how long? Because we're concerned that will there be a year where you're earning £1 million a week and you're not even on the pitch? That's a big worry.
Yeah, and Harry and Brandon, we'll get on to you guys in a moment now, because obviously myself and Dan have kind of dominated this, but just want to answer a couple of comments before I get on to you guys. Stig mentioned here the last season's sale of youngsters got us just below 70, got us below 70%, I think. It did. So the last 2 years, and see, the problem is, Stig, you have to think about as well, is in our last 3 years of financial books, we were in the Europa League for that, which is less money than the Champions League for the other two. And Maddie, I'll get on to your comment now as well about Arsenal and the Champions League as well. So because of that year, that blip in the year in the Europa League is going to be part of the books for this season and the season after. And then after that, it kind of filters back out again. So you have to factor that into it as well, with less incomings over the last 3 years. The financial 3 years thing is a rolling consecutive 3 years. It doesn't reset every 3 years. It's continuously rolling every three years. Otherwise, you'd see massive spending every 3 years and then nothing for the next two, because they'd spread it out over those 2 years. So, Maddie, to explain your question here is, how do you explain Arsenal's transfer budget over the last 3 years then, a team who hadn't been in the Champions League for 7 seasons? If you look at their transfer budget before they hit the Champions League and you look at their transfer budget after they hit the Champions League, it's a club that had very little money to then a club that had an awful lot of money very quickly. They spent £100 million on Declan Rice, what was it, 2 years ago? A year ago? 2 years ago. He didn't improve them. He brought them from second to second 2 years consecutively. Arsenal have not won a trophy either. So there's spending a lot of money, and then they're spending the right way. Arsenal then went and spent nearly £80 million this year on Calafiori and Mikel Merino. Merino is absolute dog shit, and Calafiori doesn't seem to want any part of playing in that Arsenal back four. And that's essentially why, is because if you look at the transfers before, like the Rice transfer, which was the big one, that's their Van Dijk transfer. That's their Alisson transfer, if that makes sense. That's the one big one that you're hoping will get you over the hump, but it hasn't for them. Maybe not yet, maybe it might in the future, but that's what that one is. Looking at it here, do you know, Stig, it's actually just the next year. It's next year after this. It's not an apologist, Stephen. Like, you really need to pull your head out of the sand here. Genuinely, you need to pull your head out of the sand here, because it's not an apologist thing. With more support for Klopp, he was literally on the limit of spending every season. And if you don't want to believe that, that's fine. You say here that I don't believe that. They could spend somewhere up to 150 million if they chose to in this window. They can't. They physically cannot, because we would go over the UEFA spending and be sanctioned. And that's why Man City didn't spend a penny in the summer, because they made a signing for Savinho that was from their own club, and they brought in Gundogan on a free. So if you're telling me that City could buy their way out of this issue that they're in at the moment, not a chance of it. So that's the way that I look at it. But if you look at it, so if you look at our net spend over the transfer the last 10 years, we're 11th in the league. Your argument doesn't carry water. Yeah, but who's above us? And what's our... See, again, you're not looking at it from a point of view of the entirety of the thing. So wages, amortization, transfer fees, agent fees, bonuses, it's all there. It's not as if this is private information. Liverpool's books are published publicly every year, and if you want to take 5 minutes to look at them, you can see the turnover. That it just is the way it is, Matty, realistically, and that's just the way that it is. Escapado here mentioned cut 80 mil off the wage bill this season, and fine if they want to cut the wage bill, they have to say could have sold Salah 3 years ago for 150. But they sold Salah 3 years ago for 100. Salah only signed his new deal 3 years ago. Couldn't have sold him 3 years ago. He was out of fucking contract and he had a year left. And then, as I said, as Dan mentioned, 9 months ago, people were begging for Salah to be sold. So it just shows how quickly things turn around. Similarly, people were saying, "Oh, well, Diaz was one of them that's not being paid enough." People wanted him sold in March and April as well, and now he's come out one of the best left wingers in the league. Craig, massively. They're massively in trouble because they basically had to sell their stadium to their ownership, which was really shady and backdoor. But I can guarantee if FSG tried that, the place would erupt. And they were selling hotels to the ownership and everything like that as well. It's there's so much backdoor shit that goes on at Chelsea, and they are under sanctions at the moment for all the Abramovich years. Similarly, with City getting their 130 charges as well. Liverpool operated within the rules since Klopp came in. City didn't. If City did operate within the rules, all of a sudden we have multiple Premier Leagues. Maybe not the Champions Leagues because obviously the Courtois just turned into God for one game. And the other one, we just couldn't win it. And then obviously we beat Spurs in that final as well. It's so complex. And what Dan and I have mentioned previously, I would beg everybody to do this. Please go and read Ian Graham's book. Ian Graham was the head of data analytics for Liverpool for so many years. He literally describes everything so perfectly as to how Liverpool operate. I'm going to get onto the Moneyball description in a moment, but I want to go to Harry and I want to go to Brandon because I could talk about this for hours because of how Moneyball actually works. But we don't have the budget on because we operate within the rules. That's why it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It looks like we don't have the budget because we operate within the rules, because you're competing with somebody that doesn't operate within the rules and can afford to spend £100 million on Jack Grealish and sit him on the bench for a year and have him not score in 12 months. That's it. But anyways, Harry, having known all that and seen all that and heard the sort of scenarios, do you still think it's a multifaceted blame game? Or does it fall at the feet of any one particular individual?
I'd still say overall that there's a little bit of blame to go around with everyone, but I can see how Klopp wanting control and wanting to be able to make certain decisions and then leaving. I can see how the contracts that are being signed can be centered around that. I see that point of view and it's probably right. But yeah, not a whole lot more to add on that, to be honest. I think you and Dan have covered it very well, very well.
But yeah,
I see Harry. I see how it can be centered around Klopp and the sort of issues he may have created in his final years before he left.
I mean, I don't think it's all on Klopp. I think he shoulders some, maybe a majority of the blame. But the club have blame as well because obviously they gave Klopp that power, but they were obviously handcuffed into doing so because it was either Edwards or Klopp. And if they chose Edwards and let Klopp walk, you lose the talisman of a manager that you have while still possibly being able to replicate the data activity that you had in the background. Obviously, that didn't work to the best of its ability, but shit happens. Sometimes you have to make that choice. Brandon, how are you feeling towards the situation now? Are you still of the same opinion that it's a multifaceted issue, or do you feel that somebody shoulders the blame more than others? Is it FSG? Is it Edwards? Is it Ward or Billy Gordon, or is it Klopp or who?
I can see where we're coming from here with the Klopp stuff. I think as you're kind of saying, Stephen, if we would have let him go or chose Edwards 3 years ago, it would probably not have went over well whatsoever. I mean, at that point in time, we just won the league. We're competing for everything every single season. To say, Klopp, you can go. We're going to keep the guy behind the scenes that we don't see as much, who isn't as, the father figure of the club that Klopp had became. It becomes kind of impossible not to start letting him make more decisions. And I totally get why Edwards would not be happy with that when that's been his job and he's done his job very well. And he's starting to get overruled on, which I've talked about on here before. Like it was the like Milner and Henderson sticking around year after year. I've always said if Milner wasn't becoming a coach, he should have been gone like 2 years before, and got somebody younger in. And then to my dumb cowboy American brain, the way I'm seeing it is that the teams, like as people are saying, like we could spend more. As other teams have spent more, it's like we're operating within the rules. Those teams spending more are not so much operating within the rules. Is that how my American cowboy brain is taking this correctly?
More or less, Brandon. Yeah. And essentially, as somebody pointed out here, and you probably know as well, obviously, with watching baseball and everything like that up at your end of the country with. So the Red Sox, and the reason I say the Red Sox, so if you take the Red Sox and you take the Dodgers or the Yankees, there's no salary cap in the in the MLB. There's no salary cap at all. So because of that, teams can spend whatever they want. That's why the Red Sox are look, we'll offer you this. I think it was to Juan Soto. They said, we'll offer you, what was it, 200 million, 300 million, something like that. And then I can't remember, it's the Yankees came in and said, here's 700 million. Like, how the fuck are you supposed to compete with that? That's essentially the same as United coming in with Lenny Euro. Like, Lenny Euro is a prime example of this. Real Madrid and Liverpool were only willing to pay about 30 million euro for him. United came in and said, we'll give you double. And look how that's turned.
I mean, the baseball one, I had a little look into that one. There's also a lot of shenanigans that can go on with those deals, though, isn't there? Like, a lot of them are over 10 years. They're able to, do like what Barca did, and they say, like, we won't pay you for 2 years, and then you'll get more money at the end of the contract. And there's also, it's not like, here's 5 million a year. It can be a case of, here's 1 million this year, but there's 50 million in year 6 or something ridiculous. There's all sorts of, like, I read into that one. It was because I thought, how on earth can you justify $700 million in a contract? And then I went, oh, right, okay, so there's deferring wages here and stuff like that. It just wouldn't fly in the Premier League. So it's difficult to compare the two when it comes to contracts, though. It is very difficult.
Yeah, it is, and like if everybody know, like Brandon, you know this, Bobby Bonilla Day. It's still a day in America at this day. It's like a national holiday. For those who don't know, Bobby Bonilla, was it the Mets, Brandon? I can't remember who.
Yeah, it's the Mets.
Yes, the Mets. Always the fucking Mets. It's either the Mets or the Giants. It's one of the two in baseball or American football. It's one of the two. They're the dirtiest fucking teams in the world. Bobby Bonilla's agent deserves a Nobel Peace Prize for what he did. He basically got him a deal that pays him $1.3 million a year in perpetuity until 2036. Bobby Bonilla hasn't played since the early 2000s. He is, as of, I think it's what, June 4th or 5th. It's like June 4th or 5th. Bobby Bonilla gets 1.2 million deposited into his bank account, and he will continue to get that into his bank account until about 2036. So another 12 years, 11 years. That's why it's known. Google it if you don't believe me. Bobby Bonilla Day. It's brilliant. And Stephen, if you think I'm being an FSG apologist, okay, bye. I didn't blame Klopp. I said everybody gets blame. I said most of it might go to Klopp's shoulders for how he left things. But if you think that I'm being an apologist about it, no problem. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. I won't be on for the rest of the week, so you can tune in for the rest of the week. But I didn't blame Klopp. It's just mad that.
Just responding to this one, money isn't tight like that. You can't. No one's saying that the money's tight. What we're saying is that the club spends its money on the pitch. You see Liverpool's money; it's on the pitch. Liverpool makes a loss. No one's making a profit here. No one's taking dividends out of the club. FSG aren't funding, new yachts and new ventures elsewhere in the world. Every penny that the club makes, which is a self-sustaining entity, and it always has been. They said that from day one, that the club was not going to be funded by the ownership. It was going to make its own money, and that's what it does do. And we're also excellent at doing that. We do a lot of so FSG are very good at is they are business people, and they're doing a lot better, which is something Liverpool were dreadful at for a long time, which was commercial deals. You look at some of the deals that we're doing with Japan Airlines, UPS, Peloton, Google Pixel, the list goes on. Haskaveda, when it comes to lawnmowers, for God's sakes, they're out there making. I know it's laughable, isn't it? But it's true. It's that we're going out there and finding these deals with these different businesses from around the world, and to go out there and make these deals to make us a bigger brand. Why do Manchester United have all this money to spend? Is because they were brilliant off the pitch when it came to making commercial deals. It's the reason that they're still one of the biggest clubs in world football, even though they're absolutely terrible. We are still a decade behind where Manchester United are, but without having the off-field stuff to build us to where we are, we wouldn't have players like Mohamed Salah, who's on around about £1 million a week, including all of his bonuses and all of the other bits and pieces that he's paid. There is so much more that goes on. And please, just go and read Ian Graham's book. Go and read Chasing Salah that's just been released. It'll give you all of this information. Don't just believe what we've got to say on here and call us FSG apologists. Go and have a look at the club's financial statement. The club made a loss. 9 million, it made a loss. We've got a stadium that's nearly 50% bigger than what it used to be. You've got down the M62 at Manchester United, it's literally falling down. We have a brand new training ground in Kirkby that's just been built, sponsored by AXA, and is one of the most valuable deals when it comes to even a training ground. I think the ownership have done brilliantly. They're not perfect, but no ownership is perfect because they're billionaires. They're probably all evil. You don't become a billionaire without being evil in some respect to it. But to say, why did we sign Chiesa and pay him 150 grand a week? It's just a little bit sort of, that's not what we're saying. Federico Chiesa is worth more than 10 million euros or 10 million pounds, whatever it was that we paid for him. And if it doesn't work out, we'll probably sell him for a profit and he'll go back to Italy. But worst case scenario, we end up with one of the best European footballers and attackers as an option, as a squad option. Never mind a first team player. He's a squad option. I mean, I don't see how that can be a bad thing.
No, nor can I. And as well, he's on 150k because that's what he was on over in. I don't even know if he is on it. I'd have to check that. But his salary is what it is.
Gross, yeah.
150 gross. Well, if he's on 100, but then his transfer fee was 12 million pound. 12 million euros, so like 10 million pound. So,
what's that?
But that if you amortize that over the space of 5 years, which we can do, it's 2 million a year, which is absolute pittance. Which is why you could probably bump his salary up a little bit more to entice him to come.
Matty, I'm not making these numbers up, mate. It's go and have a look on your phone now. It's in the Guardian. It's on a news article. He earns around about £1 million. Go and have a look at it now, because it's not a joke. It's true. £1 million is how much he's paid. It's not made up. The club has a base salary of around £350,000 a week. But if you don't already know, there's things called bonuses and image rights and all of the other things that go into a player's contract and how much they earn. It's not just what he's paid. The club pay him around about £1 million a week through multiple different sources.
Exactly. So that's what it is. So it's not just the salary. It's goal bonus, game bonus, match bonus, multiple match bonuses, non-injury bonuses, winning trophies, jersey sales, appearances, hitting X amount of goals per season, hitting X amount of assists per season, hitting X amount of appearances per season, hitting a minutes goal, hitting Salah could even have a clean sheets thing in his salary. Then obviously making team of the season, winning player of the month, winning player of the week, scoring X amount of points in FPL a week. Like, there's so much shit that could be thrown into it. It's nuts. Robert's just asking here, are we saying we could never afford to give Trent, Verge and Mo a pay increase? No, not at all. We can, but we can't just go around and hand all three of them £500,000 a week. They can get bonuses and they can get increases because we've now trimmed some of the fat from last season with Matip, Thiago, Adrian off the books. It's about £15 million off the books every year. And then, Derek here mentioned as well, shirt sales he gets a percentage of, shoe deals he gets a percentage of, his salary, everything like that as well. It's nuts. This will blow your mind, right? And I done the maths on this earlier. Salah earns his 52 million a year. If we wanted, before we put bonuses in, we could sign Kvaratskhelia, Omar Marmoush, and Rayan Cherki and the salaries and the amortization of all of those combined transfer fees would be less per year over 5 years than paying Mohamed Salah. Just to give you an idea of how much we actually pay Salah. And I done the maths on this earlier. Turkey's about 30 million euro, works out at about 25 million pound. He's on £63,000 a week at Lyon. So you could just turn around and hand him 100 grand a week. Kvaratskhelia, the rumored price and what I've seen is, Craig, I don't disagree with you, but it's more to put it in context of what is the equivalent. I don't disagree with you whatsoever. So with Kvaratskhelia, the rumored price was about 70 to 80 million euro, which works out at about 66 million pound maximum. And then he wanted somewhere between, there was multiple Italian news sources that confirmed this, and I'm nearly sure Romano did as well. But he wanted about 9 million euro in salary, which is about £7.5 million. And then Omar Marmoush is about 50 million euros, about 40 million pounds, and then he's currently on 30,000 euros a week at Eintracht Frankfurt. You could easily offer him 70 and bump him up 70,000 pounds and bump him up to 100,000 euro, which is a 70,000 euro increase a week. All of that over 5 years is less per year than what Liverpool pay Mohamed Salah. Just to put it into context of how much money Salah is actually getting from the club. And I wish we were making these numbers up. We really are not. That's more or less why. And there is incredible numbers here, Jamie. Thank you so much for everybody joining us. It's over 7,500 people there watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Make sure of your notifications on for all future streams of videos as well, so that you never miss out. We knew it was going to be heated because, to be honest with you, GMUs, it's been heated for quite a while. Everybody just wants an answer. Everybody wants to put blame somewhere. So this is why myself and Dan spoke earlier, and we were like, you know what? Fuck it. We'll just have sort of an open discussion about it and see what everybody thinks. But what I'll do now is I'll kind of rotate onto Moneyball, because Maddie here wanted to mention it. Where was it? So what happened to the Moneyball system? Losing 100 million pounds doesn't seem like the Moneyball system to me. His contract negotiations should have started 2 years ago. I'd imagine that's in relation to Trent, but obviously we've gone through that, so I won't touch on that last point. But we'll discuss Moneyball as a whole. Harry, you said that you don't feel like you're clued in all that much, and I said it to you about a couple of weeks ago to go and give Moneyball a watch, the actual movie itself. Now, whether you have done or you haven't done, I'm not going to give out to you for not doing your homework. It's fine. But do you have any sort of an understanding of how it works? Because I know Dan does, and I'm pretty sure Brandon does as well. But do you have any sort of an understanding of how it works?
Yeah, the idea of buying wins rather than buying players. Like, there's no point just splashing cash on all these different players that everyone wants us to sign when they're not going to improve us. I think people talk about when we won the Champions League and then signed Adrian, Sepp Vandenberg and Harvey Elliott, maybe someone else. But you couldn't really make that team any better. We almost won the Premier League and we won the Champions League.
And then won the Premier League a year later.
Yeah, so it couldn't have got any better. There's no one you could have signed, especially, and then you think all these dream players everyone wants to sign, most of them aren't available anyway or attainable almost. So I get the idea of not just splashing the cash. You've got to be smart with your transfers, which is what we pride ourselves on as a club. We rarely sign players that flop as such, or we don't get our money back on. I know the odd one, and Naby Keita didn't work out, but you almost put that down to injuries rather than him not being a good player. But yeah, I sort of get the idea on a basic understanding. Yeah.
So Brandon, I'm assuming, I know Dan does. I don't need his tism to come into this and match my tism at the moment. But Brandon, I'm under the impression that, like, you've watched Moneyball, you know what the whole Moneyball is with Billy Bean and the Oakland Athletics and how everything works, yeah?
Oh, yeah, of course I do.
Yeah. So to explain to the uninitiated, as Harry just mentioned, you're buying wins. So rather than buying players, you're buying wins. And what player gets you that win quicker? So the way that it was explained in the Moneyball system through analytics and data is, in order to buy wins, you got to buy runs, and that's what baseball scoring system is. It's scoring a run, so a home run. Anybody that isn't aware. Similarly, in football and scenario, it's scoring goals and clean sheets. They're what get you wins. Your defenders get you clean sheets. Your forwards get you Goals, your goalkeeper gets you clean sheets. Your midfielders do a combination of both. So the whole idea is they take hundreds of thousands of data points and boil it down to one number. And it's like, to imagine it, imagine a scale of 1 to 100. 1 being a terrible signing, 100 being the perfect signing. That's what it is. That's what it would rate you. So a guy that's on a 90 would get you more wins than a guy that's on a 30. And so you'd obviously try and go for the guy that's 90. But then you also need to cut through the bullshit of, oh, well, has he played for this club for long? Has he played at a high level for long? Take a look at Salah, for example. Salah's a perfect example of Moneyball. Flopped at Chelsea, then went to, I think it was Basel he was in, and then he went to Roma. And over the course of a couple of years, he then developed into a different player, and we got him at the age of 25 and nabbed him at just the perfect time for less than £40 million. And now look at him. Literally one of the best players that the Premier League has ever seen. Like Stig mentioned in here, Ian Graham left a leadership job at CERN. And if you don't know what CERN is, you know that big Hadron Collider that's in Switzerland. That's who it is. Liverpool employ doctorate level physicists to operate their data centers. It's not some rinky-dink fella like any of us that's just in there doing it. It's a guy that's like has a doctorate in particle physics and quantum physics that do this kind of shit and computer coding. It's absolutely nuts. I'm going to just very briefly explain how, like, I'll give you the example. So Zubamendi during the summer is probably the best example to go for. It was there until the 11th hour, and then it kind of all fell apart. So when that fell apart, everyone is like, oh, we never had a backup. We didn't have a backup option. We did. It was Chiesa. And you're probably all looking at me as if I've got 6 heads at the moment. But the reason it was Chiesa is because of all of the targets that were there available. The first thing they look at is player and stats. Next thing, they're like, where have they played? Because each league that's lower than the Premier League has a specific handicap added to it. And then, so for example, a player that's scoring 20 goals a year in the French league is probably going to see a drop off when they come to the Premier League. Do you know what, Stig? I'm going to answer you. Tony Bloom. But he operates in the exact same way as we do, but he's able to afford to put players like Baleba and Evan Ferguson out on the squad because they're not competing for titles year in and year out. Tony Bloom is another excellent owner. And who's the guy that owns Brentford? He's another fantastic owner that's there. And you know what? Liverpool copied their ownership and their data models. Tony Bloom owns a betting company. I can't remember the name of the betting company, but he owns a betting company. And that's how Brighton are able to find these guys, because he has literal skyscrapers of data farms that are farming all of this information for him through his betting company that do all the chance creation and stuff like that. But Robert, it is looking dodgy. But the reason that it's looking dodgy is because he had so many mismanaged injuries and he didn't have a preseason, and they said it would take him about 5 months to get up to yes, that's I'm not sure. Tony Bloom owns Union Saint-Gilles in Belgium, which is where Alexi McAllister's brother plays for. Funny that, because they both came from the same club, and he took the better brother and left the other one with the smaller club. And then Brentford also own Midtjyllandia too, which is another one too. It's the multi-club model that they do it that way. And Midtjyllandia were in dire straits, crying out for somebody to come in, and then Brentford's owner came in and completely saved them with that model. So that's why we were interested in, if you remember earlier in the summer, there was a winger from Midtjyllandia that was what we were interested in. And Dan, you joked about this and said, Jesus, we're shopping in the fucking Danish league. But that's Brentford's ownership that found him.
And the reason I'll pull a face at that is that as much as we've just lauded Tony Bloom and the Brentford ownership, what's the difference between them and us? We win things and they don't. They exist to make money. They exist to buy players to then sell them on to the big boys, and then they get to take all the risks. Now, they take mitigated risks. They'll buy Baleba or Caicedo for £3 or £4 million, and then if he works out and becomes an £80 to £100 million player, well, they're a genius, aren't they? But we'll all forget the list of players who fail at Brighton because we won't even know who they are. Because unless you follow Brighton, you won't know who fails at Brighton. We only remember the winners. Ian Graham, again, I'll go back to him. Again, I'll explain the importance of either listening to his book or reading his book. It explains the fact that through data, even if you do all of the research, all of the work, all of the data, over 50% of transfers fail. That's an incredibly high percentage of the, even when you buy a footballer, having done all the work and you think they're this and you think you're that and they think they're the best players in the world and World Cup winners, over 50% of them fail as transfers. And that's a massive risk. And it's probably the reason why when we did go into that season, when we'd, won the Champions League, went on to win the league, sometimes it isn't possible to improve a football team, because if you were to bring in a footballer, and a lot of people will have the opinion that, well, they'll just happily sit there on the bench or happily not make the team or happily go from being a starting player to being a rotational player. That's just not true. It just isn't true that many of them will have the ego to match, which will come with the fact that if they're not playing, there's only so much room in a football team. One thing that's forgotten also, when in response to people saying that Jurgen Klopp wasn't backed, he was backed, but he also can't say he wasn't backed and also want a small football team at the same time. You can't have it both ways. He always wanted a small group. He wanted to have 25 to 26 footballers. He didn't want 30. That was what Jurgen Klopp wanted. So it's also falls into that situation as well. But it's a downside and it's a positive. It's frustrating and it's also brilliant. It's amazing when it comes off and the club goes out and spends £75 million and buys Virgil van Dijk. So it is willing to spend the money when the right player is out there. And unfortunately, they don't come round very often. But the thing about Salah is, we got Salah. If you listen to or read the Chasing Salah book, we couldn't believe as a club that nobody else wanted Salah. This was because the club was ahead of its time. They'd all thought that everyone else was going to be looking at him, but we actually got a free go at him. And the reason we got him for the price is because nobody else was going after him. And that was because everyone else had this sort of uneducated opinion that he was a Premier League flop. And that just wasn't true.
Exactly. That's the way that I look at it as well. There's so many different facets to it. Jamie was here mentioning that data can't be the only factor and that we still need the human element as well. Absolutely. But when you have a Liverpool team that has a global reach like we do, so I give, this is the example that was in, I have the book here. Where the fuck is it? This is another book, Ex Genius. It is an absolutely fantastic book by James Tippett that I would recommend for anybody. And the way that it's explained in that book, and he uses Brighton, Brentford, and Liverpool as case studies within the book. So it really dives deep into all three. So Man City, we'll just use Man City and Liverpool, and then we'll also use Southampton and Leicester. The amount Man City and Liverpool, there's probably of the about 4,000 players that are in Europe's top 5 leagues, there's maybe 5 that would instantly improve both Man City and Liverpool at their peak. There's maybe about 5. So the data cuts through all the shit of looking at those other 3,995 players and finds you that 5 like that. Whereas Southampton and Leicester, of those 4,000, there's probably about 3,000 that'll improve them across Europe's top 5 leagues. Now, whether they're able to get those 3,000 players is a different story. Similarly, whether Liverpool and Man City are able to get those top 5 players is a different story. But that's how it works in regards to, like, at the top, it's very, very, very minute details that will push you a little bit higher. But the cost to get you to that minute detail can usually be made up in the aggregate. And that's what the story is. But that's exactly it. Jamie was like, I if I was making this up, I'm sure everybody could call me out on it, but I'm really not. And yes, Stig, United signs the other 3,995. We've seen that definitely, but that's what I mean at the level. So when you're at a Premier League winning level, like, yes, but it looks like they do, Robert. But the reason it looks like they do is because they're able to afford to throw a 19-year-old Baleba in at CDM, because they're not competing for a Premier League year in and year out. We are. Evan Ferguson himself was offered academy time at Liverpool and would have signed for Liverpool, but he couldn't. He would have been behind Bobby Firmino at the time. And then obviously Cody Gakpo came in, and then Darwin Nunez came in. He would not have been given the minutes to develop as a footballer the way he wanted. So that's why he went to Brighton, because Brighton can afford, and this is Evan Ferguson's words himself, Liverpool can't afford to put a 17-year-old at their striker position when they're going for Premier Leagues year in and year out. Brighton can. And that was the best option for me to go there. And then, Chelsea hits them one or two that come out of their academy and leave and go to other clubs.
They also miss a one or two of them. Kevin De Bruyne
2,000.
and Mohamed Salah, just to name a couple.
And Musiala as well as another one. Out of 100, that is. Yeah. Well, look, still hit on two. So when it comes to improving the side like Liverpool, like you're moving from 90% to 91%, whereas Southampton and Leicester will be moving from 30%, sign 3 or 4 players, and all of a sudden they're up to 70%, if that makes sense. It's kind of how it works. And I think Brighton don't have a better scouting system than us. I think they're looking for different players than us, which makes it easier for them in a way that they can pump those 19-year-olds out into the squad much easier than we can. I would have loved for us to have gone and signed Baleba, but he wouldn't have developed in the same manner with us. Similarly with Evan Ferguson, he wouldn't have been given the opportunity to do it with us. No, Jamie, this is all fire in this chat. We're not going anywhere near transfer. To be honest, there's actually no fucking transfer news, Jamie. I won't lie to you. There really is no transfer news other than maybe some of Darwin Nunez liking a picture of himself, which it's just him in a red jersey. And I really wouldn't look at it any deeper than that, to be perfectly honest with you. But with Trent, then I suppose we can touch on Trent for a couple of minutes before we finish up. But I hope everybody did enjoy that FSG ownership and everything, right? Like, yeah, like we were linked with Baleba, and I think that was purely out of spite that somebody said, oh well, Liverpool can't get Caicedo, so they're going to go after Brighton's replacement for Caicedo, which was 2 years ago, mind you. So he would have been Baleba's only going 21 shortly. He would have been 19 at the time. If we turned around and signed a 19-year-old to put him in at the CDM position, we'd have been looked at like absolute idiots. But we'll take a look at Dibbling, Tyler Dibbling. I'm not going to lie to you, that came from the Daily Mail, JMUs. I wouldn't really take that with much credence at all. I think people are just coming up with stories at this point, similarly to the year that we were in for midfielders. Every midfielder under the sun was linked with us. Derek mentioned in here, we have a good scouting system. As soon as we're linked with anybody, the other top 6 sides are linked with them too, and their scouting is shite. I don't disagree with you, but we're going to touch on Trent just a little bit for a few minutes now. I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let everybody else talk. Yeah, the daily fail. That's why. That's exactly why I didn't take it with much credence. Now, it was Craig Hope, who's a little bit more reliable than most, but I don't see how Tyler Dibbling is going to be somebody that comes in and immediately rocks the boat with us. But Brandon, I'll throw it over to you first in relation to Trent and his situation. So we've seen obviously that Real Madrid are So we've seen that Real Madrid are very confident and very interested and are really confident the deal gets done. So confident that they're going to put in 2 bids for him in January when they can get him in 6 months for 0 transfer fee. Now that doesn't scream confidence to me personally, but how are you thinking about this situation at the moment?
I'm 50-50 with the Trent stuff. Like, ask me tomorrow, I say he's staying. Today, I feel like he's going. It's every single day, it feels a little bit different. I can get where you're thinking, like, they're making so much noise that they're actually not that confident. It's just, basically, saying everything the loudest that you actually feel about yourself, being that insecure about your own, power in the negotiation. Is that they may feel like he's actually leaning towards staying, so they're just trying to make as much noise, maybe get the fans to turn on him, so there it's easier for him to leave. But at the same time, I feel like he would be maybe a little bit more forthright and say, hey, I know he says he wants to keep this all private, all the negotiations as private as possible, but I feel like there'd be some assurances, hey, we're going to be talking, we're going to be discussing different contracts, different things, what happens. Because I feel like right now it's just so negative around him because we are pushing for title. It's just a big distraction that's not needed. We don't want to be going into the end of January. All of a sudden he says he's leaving in February 1st. And it's like, well, Bradley gets hurt and Trent doesn't feel like going at it because he's, fucking off in a few months. We're going to have some problems at right back. And it's just a whole bunch of extra stress that we don't need. I just wanted just a little bit of assurance I'd be fine. But tomorrow, I think he's staying. Today, I think he's leaving.
Yeah, I think everybody's kind of in the same boat. Jamie's mentioned here that Jonathan Ogden with ESPN says Madrid are borderline tampering. Of course they're tampering. I could tell you 3 months ago they were tampering. They were working on it since March. That's tampering. They literally are tampering with him in relation to it.
We all do it, though.
Yeah, everybody knew it. I mean, it is his fault, Matty, but if he goes with your thanks and blessing, you'll be one of very few. I'll tell you now, his mural will be painted over within an hour of him getting on the plane. Harry, we're all back and forth on it, and we're all looking at it from, and Stig mentioned here, the Madrid PR machine is just working overtime at the moment. Are you, anyway, do you even know what to think about this situation at the moment?
I just think I'm tired of it, honestly. It's just, every day there's something new, and it's like, there's nothing anyone can do about it until he either signs with us or signs with them. What more needs to be said? I think a report came out today or yesterday about him just being unsure, and that's probably as honest as it gets, because the Real Madrid are pumping out as much PR as they can, saying they're going to get him, and he's coming, and they're making a bid. But over here in England, we're hearing basically nothing from our journalists other than Real Madrid made an approach for January signing. They're not saying he's staying or leaving, so I think that's and if they knew, they'd say. So until he makes his mind up and he signs something, there's not much any of us can do or any of us can say about it. It just feels like every day on Twitter or something, there's something new, and I'm like, if it's not him signing something, then news is sort of pointless. It's just pointless. It's just pointless.
It's the money-making season of all of the journalists. This is when they make their money and when they make their money in the summer. So expect daily updates from Madrid, daily updates from the likes of Lewis Steele. Now, to be fair, Lewis Steele has really come on. He's gotten he has gotten the same source as Paul Joyce, who's one of the most in-tune Liverpool reporters out there. And it's absolutely fantastic to see, because I actually quite like Lewis Steele. For me personally, before I move on to Dan, it's just, I'm very much the same as Harry and Derek here. Just stay or go at this point, so that we can actually plan for shit in the summer. And you say you don't want it to be played out in public. Well, that kind of goes out the window when you're dealing with Madrid and Papa Perez and Don Carlo. None of that shit happens. And there was reports that came out that said Carlo Ancelotti is like trying to get him to sign this January. And I'm like, Don Carlo doesn't break out the brakes unless Real Madrid are proper desperate. And I've seen somebody mention earlier that they're desperate because of the lack of right backs. But they said 3 days ago that they're fine playing Freddie Valverde there. It is what it is. We are fans to judge, Matty. If he wants to try a new challenge, nobody has a problem with him leaving. Not a single person has a problem with him leaving to start anew in Real Madrid. Nobody has a problem with that. What people have a problem with is him running down his contract specifically for this, to allow himself and his brother to get a fat fee for their agency, because that's what this is. Jude Bellingham, his dad, and his agent all got €20 million each from Real Madrid with a transfer fee. Kylian Mbappe got 120 or 150 million euro of a bonus for signing on as a free agent. Trent is the only big cash cow that his brother, I think it's Trey or Tyler, has. He is James Maddison and somebody else, but James Maddison's never going to be his payday. Trent is going to be his payday. So having family represent you, first of all, was a poor mistake by Trent, because they're obviously not going to give you the best interests at heart. He wasn't allowed to run his contract down. He purposefully ran it down, Matty. Like, if you're just going to constantly not listen to the points that we've discussed in this, that's completely fine. But don't sit there and just spout bullshit, because that's what that is. We said earlier when we ran through the whole scenario of everything, he signed it in 2021. He wasn't going to renew the year after. Edwards left that year. Ward was put in charge. Ward left the following year. Klopp was put in charge. We had a bad season, no director of football, and there was uncertainty around the club. Then now we're into the final 24 months. Klopp announces he's leaving before they hit the 18th month mark. No player worth his salt going into his prime is going to turn around and try and renew with 2 years left. They'll do it with 18 months left. Klopp tells everybody he's leaving before they hit the 18-month mark. The club's not going to operate within bad faith and try and sign him. It's how am I attacking the man's family? I said his agent is advising him poorly and his agent is his family, and it's bad practice to have your family as your agency because they may not have your best interests at heart because they have everything to gain and nothing to lose from it realistically. But then if he was sold, you would have lynched the ownership anyway. So they're damned if they do and damned if they don't, Matty. So if he was sold, they get lynched anyway. If he runs down his contract, they get lynched. So what do you want them to do? Because they couldn't sign him last summer. Jamie Hughes, I don't mind it at all, so don't worry. They couldn't sign him last summer because Klopp was deciding whether he was going or whether he was staying. Well, no, not any different from a normal agent, but anybody that gets family involved in their business and anybody that's been involved with family in business, East Side Trade, knows that it's a bad business. It's you don't shit where you eat is the best way to describe it. And you need to keep items like that with big business money separate. And we've seen it so many times with certain agencies that, like, who's the player that I'm trying to think of that was linked with us for the god longest while? Who was his name?
Rabiot?
Yes, Rabiot. Rabiot's mother is his agent.
Who's his agent, everyone?
Rabiot's mother is his agent.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to sign him because she's an absolute terror.
How many trophies has Harry Kane won? Who's his agent?
It's his family. So that's my point. It's like Anelka is another one, Zia. Absolutely. It's just very bad practice, morally and ethically. But to answer the question, Maddie, like he should have been sold when owners take responsibility for their asset. If he was sold, you would have killed him. But it looks better than what? No, I can guarantee you every single person that's in this fan base that is FSG out would have lynched them for selling Trent, no matter when. And it letting them walk out the door for 100 million as well for free, he would have been lynched too. They're damned if they do and damned if they don't. It's a lose-lose situation for them, and they were handcuffed by Klopp's decision last season to leave. They really were, because no player is going to commit to that. But anyways, I'm going to move on and answer one last question before we finish up, because we've gone on quite a long time today and we've just over 9,000 people viewing. Curtis has asked, this is obviously in relation to the Man City stuff earlier on that we were discussing with them overspending. No, what will probably happen is the same thing that happened Juve. They'll just get voided. So as fans, we'll know we won them because the team ahead of us cheated. Arsenal will get one as well. Spurs, ironically, will get a trophy too if they get stripped of all titles, hilariously. So if that's a world you want to live in, fair play to you. I don't want to live in that world personally. But what will happen is that it's as Derek mentions, null and voided. Reese's agent was his mother too. Talk to her and I don't want to again. And Pogba's the exact same. So that's the way that it is. There's so many that are advised by family. It's horrible. But to answer your question, Curtis, on the trophies, no, they won't be given to us. They'll be voided like they were with Juve in Serie A, and then they'll just be fucked from the league. And that's a whole other hour and a half worth of a video that I could get into with regards to the 115 charges, because I've looked into that as well properly, and they're fucked. But we're going to leave it today, and we're going to come back. We'll be back again tomorrow with 7:30 p.m. UK time. Harry and Brandon, I do apologize. The run of myself kind of went away there, and myself and Dan kind of went off on our own tangents. Jamie Hughes, thank you so much. Happy New Year's and positive to everybody. Osman's agent is in his family. That's fine. Doesn't mean he's a good agent. It's just one of them things. Like it's agents all types of agents can be bad, but normally when you're dealing with family, they're more bad than good, unfortunately. But before we go, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Make sure that you have your notifications on for all future streams and videos so that you never miss out. I want to thank everybody for joining us. We have just under 9,500 people here watching us across YouTube and Twitter. Make sure to jump over to our YouTube page if you're currently watching on Twitter at the moment, as we'd love to have you as a subscriber and get streams like this every day of the week. We'll be back again tomorrow from 7:30 p.m. UK time. I definitely need a sauna as well after this, Jamie. It's very stressful, but that will relax me a lot. From myself, Harry, Brandon, and Dan, I want to wish everybody a lovely evening, and we'll see you all again tomorrow. So, bye-bye.